The following news flash is brought to you by the Lone Star Lowdown, providing your daily bulletins for the commodities market. Today in history, news updates, and the inside scoop into the tides of the alternative. Markets for Friday, April Fool's Day 2016 are currently trading with gold at $1,221.75 an ounce, silver $15.04 an ounce, Texas crude $38.34 a barrel, and Bitcoin is currently sitting at about 416 U.S. currency. Today in history, the year 2001. Same-sex civil unions become legal in the Netherlands. The first country in the world issued civil union licenses to gay and lesbian couples. Today in history. In recent news, some corporate April Fool's pranks went not so well this year. Yahoo's Inc. news service published an article reporting that all the Trader Joe's more than 450 grocery stores would be closing in 2017. Trader Joe's fans went to Twitter with mad tweets, even though at the end of the article it stated that it was clearly a joke. A spokeswoman for Trader Joe's said that the chain had nothing to do with it. And Google, who has been quite active in pranking customers for the last decade on this date, added a Gmail mic drop button to their Gmail services, which automatically sent an animated image from the Minions movie showing the character Bob dropping a microphone. Many users were unhappy after accidentally pressing the button, sending the joke email in reply to more serious ones. A CIA K-9 unit conducted a routine training exercise with law enforcement officials at a school district in Loudoun County, Virginia, during spring break, during which explosive material was inadvertently left by the CIA in one of the school buses used in the exercise, which now appears to have unknowingly carried students for 2 days while the explosive material sat underneath the hood. Loudoun County Public Schools officials stated that the bus was in service on Monday and Tuesday, made 8 runs totaling roughly 145 miles, carrying 26 students. The explosive material was discovered during a routine maintenance job Wednesday afternoon. Why the fumble? Apparently a container holding the explosives was hidden inside the engine compartment during the K-9 training, of which a portion of it fell from the container into the engine compartment and was simply overlooked during the recovery. And though the CIA is assuring the public that the material posed no immediate danger, the exact nature of the material is not being released by request of the CIA. To ensure, I'm sure, that a compromising of training techniques is not made public, Loudoun County Public Schools, county law, and fire officials and the CIA have announced this particular training program has been suspended until a thorough review of all procedures is completed. This is Rick Brody with your lowdown for April 1st, 2016.
Rise up, children. Rise up, children. Remember the victims.
Welcome to the Vaccine Myth, an issue of trust. Today is Sunday, April 3rd, 2016, and I'm your host, Sean Siegel. And we are indeed being brought to you again, and as always, over the auspices of the Low Ghost Radio Network. And howdy to everyone listening here in Austin and wherever else the signal is being picked up and broadcast, and certainly over lowghostradionetwork.com. We're going to be focusing for the next probably month or so each week. Certainly won't be the only thing we cover, but we'll be focusing on the difference in overall health of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And we're going to do it in a very specific way. We're going to have parents on to testify about the difference in the overall health of their kids, some of whom are vaccinated and some of whom, meaning their siblings, are not. So, for instance, our guest today will be Sandra Staley, who was a guest on this show, hard to believe, but almost 3 years ago now. And she was a pleasure to have on. I was looking forward to it before she was on the show the first time, because she came on as a stalwart defender of the authority of parents versus the authority of an MD or a pediatrician or an OBGYN, or certainly a local, state, or federal government over the health, well-being, and treatment and medical procedures administered to her child. That the parent is the sovereign, that if a doctor tries to coerce emotionally or otherwise you to vaccinate your child when you have already said that you do not want to vaccinate your child, that what makes all the difference in the world is your attitude. And if you simply realize and express the fact that you, as the parent, typically the mom, are the authorities, especially and certainly the mom, the woman who gave birth to the child. That authority, that responsibility, unavoidable, comes with the childbirth. It's something that, giving all things natural, that a mother simply cannot avoid, is the desire to keep her baby safe and fed and warm and healthy. And of course, the only thing that's changed this in this modern day society of ours, in our case in particular, since we're talking about vaccines, is really the last 6 decades of PR. Starting around the 60s, ramping up in the 70s, and going full tilt boogie in the 80s. And of course, by 1990, I think it was, or 91, is when they added the Hep B day of birth shot. And that's one of those critical periods where we saw the rate of autism increasing. And there are others who say that it began increasing with the increased use of aborted fetal cell tissues, that it's the injection of human tissue into other humans that is a major part of the problem that's causing neurological disorders, including autism. But Sandra was on the show, as I say, I think it was July of 2013, just as a spokesperson for parental sovereignty. And she will be on the show this time to speak specifically, as I've suggested, to the difference in health between her older 2 kids and her younger 2 kids. She has 4 children. The older 2 were vaccinated, the younger 2 were not. And she, as she said in her response, I put up a request on my Facebook page. It's been a month ago now. An all points bulletin, an APB for parents of kids, some of whom are vaccinated, some not, asking for their stories of the difference in the health. And Sandra was the first to answer, not surprisingly. And she said it's so obvious that it's astounding, that the difference in health is so obvious, it's astounding. And that's what we will be focusing on for the next 3 or 4 shows. I had a couple of other parents, a couple of moms lined up for next week, and maybe a third. And I think we'll be having at least 2, if not 3, maybe even 4 parents on the show for the next 3 or 4 weeks running. We want to do just a thorough, repetitive retelling of the reality. Now, of course, this doesn't cover everything. It wouldn't cover those parents who persistently and consistently, and I would have said the same thing, I think, years ago, that their children have been fully vaccinated and there's been no problems whatsoever. We know now that you can't really say that. You also can't convince or even get most parents to consider the possibility that damage was done, but at such a subtle level that it's indiscernible. I mean, it's very likely, and some scientists say this, Dr. Molden said it, Dr. Blaylock says it, others say it, that because of the route of introduction of the injection of disease, of undigested proteins, of various, whole sundry list of toxins and neurotoxins and contaminants that could be carcinogenic or otherwise dangerous. In some cases, it's been bird flu, live bird flu virus included in a vaccine, that there's no choice, that it's inevitable that brain damage will result. And I'll go back again to, I believe it was the polio vaccine that I got when I was 12 years of age or so. All right, I was born in 44, so 54, I would have been 10. Probably I was 11 or 12 by the time I got around to getting the polio shot. And what I remember is that when I left, I got nauseous and my dad had to stop the car on the way home. This was about, I'd say 10, 15, 20 minutes after I actually got the shot. And I'd always chalked it up to being a nervous kid. I really was not looking forward to the shot. But, you know, there are a lot of other things in my life that I've experienced that I knew I was going to, and I really wasn't looking forward to, but I didn't get nauseous afterwards. And nausea is one of the most common adverse vaccine reactions. And yes, it is an adverse reaction. And it's a result of the body, I know now, trying to expunge the toxic ingredients that had just been injected into it. I mean, if you think about the fever, sometimes a rash, and sometimes those rashes are associated, especially with live virus vaccines, with the disease itself. Measles and chickenpox come to mind immediately, of course. But sometimes rashes and fevers that happen the same day, and the nausea, those, as a rule, are not a result of the onset of the respective disease or diseases included in the vaccine. Because, as we know, when you are exposed naturally to a disease, it takes anywhere from 3 to 10 days, sometimes much longer, for that disease to incubate. And it's only at the end of that incubation period that you start displaying the symptoms. They do not happen the same day. You might start feeling a little bit run down. You know, if you're exposed to somebody with a cold sometimes and you start feeling it that same day, but you don't feel it as a fever and a nausea. You just feel a little bit uneasy, perhaps. But those larger symptoms, those more severe symptoms of cold or any other disease, they do not display for a much longer period of time. When you look at it in terms of minutes and hours, they do not display within 15 minutes of being exposed. But they do in the case of vaccination. But it's not the disease. That's the difference. That's the point. That it's obvious because of how quickly they occur, how quickly they display, that it's not the disease that you're experiencing. It's a reaction to the vaccine itself. And so those parents who do have kids, and that's most, who have been vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and who don't think there's anything wrong, they have no way of knowing. It could be very subtle brain damage. It could cut off a point or two off the IQ. Who knows? It could be responsible, we do know this, for diabetes that occurs later, or some more minor nerve damage that causes an ADD or ADHD situation, where a child can't concentrate and can't express it because it's so damn subtle, but it's because the nerve transmissions literally in the body are having trouble progressing. The signals are having trouble getting back and forth through the body and to, from, and within the brain, because there's perhaps been some damage to the myelin sheath, the insulation surrounding our nerves, because aluminum tends to attack the myelin. And aluminum is in probably 60 to 65% of the vaccines given to all our kids, especially from the day of birth to 24 months to 2 years. So, and no parent really knows whether a child's been damaged or not, because you don't know what the difference would have been in the child's intellect or personality or neurological status had the child not been vaccinated. But it's certainly, nonetheless, a poignant difference when you have some kids who are vaccinated and some are not, and there's a distinct difference in their overall health. And they're coming from the same parents, generally, so very similar genetic inheritance. Then it makes a poignant statement and testimony for parents to describe to us the difference. Sandra will do that when we come back in 2 minutes.
Now, you are listening to the Logos Radio Network, logosradionetwork.com.
Okay, for some reason we have not received the call from Sandra at the moment. We'll try and get her on the line here during the next break. What I'll do is I've already made a kind of a cursory list in Word, Microsoft Word, of the replies. I had 153, and 153 parents responding most of them within a few hours. But over 24 hours, 153 parents. And of those, actually said 153 responses, and I've learned from experience that doesn't include the replies to the comments. And some of the parents were testifying in the replies to some of the other comments. And so, long story short, got something like 100 or 110, and that's just from my own Facebook page. And those, of course, are the folks who pay the most dedicated attention to me personally. I did ask on a couple other pages and did get a few other testimonies. But for the reasons stated, and it's obvious, these are all poignant. And since we don't have Sandra on the line with us, I'm just going to go over a few of these. Without mentioning any names, my oldest is now almost 7 and was vaccinated until he had a reaction. He has severe asthma, which was also the reaction he received from the MMR and the DTaP. I also have a completely vax-free 4-year-old, and he's, in comparison, way healthier. And she says, she started out by saying, I don't know if I would qualify. And I answered her and said, you just qualified. I have 5 vaccinated children, 1 unvaccinated granddaughter. Chose not to vax because of all the problems that my children have experienced. Chronic ear infections as a child, and as an adult, possible IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome. Sandra, are you there? Hello?
Hi there.
Oh, hi. Hi, I'm glad you made it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I was just reading, since I wasn't expecting you to get in touch until the next break, I was just reading some of the comments. Let me read them again for you real quickly. We'll just, Sandra, this is going to be the focus for the next month on my show. I don't know why I didn't think about it before, because this is such a good way to make a point. Mm-hmm. And I spent a long time pointing out to the audience during the first break that during the first segment rather, that it doesn't cover all the bases, but it covers a major one, that we know that within one family, where generally speaking, the genetic inheritance is going to be relatively the same. The diet, the environment, many of those potentially different inputs will be very similar within the same family. And where the major difference is the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and if there's a major difference in health, which there certainly is, that makes an obviously important point. And we can't do much about those parents who think that their kids are perfectly healthy after vaccination, because in many cases we know that they have vaccine injuries in many cases that are simply not recognized as such down the line, and they can occur 8 and 10 and 12 years later. And even in those cases where the kids appear to be healthy their entire lives, you don't know what the difference would have been in their overall achievement, their overall intelligence, all those subtle little things, if there had been no vaccination. There's no way to determine that. But we can only deal with what we can deal with. The couple that I read, first one was my oldest is now 7, was vaccinated until he had a reaction. He has severe asthma, which was also the reaction he got from the MMR and DTaP. And I also have a completely vax-free 4-year-old, and he's in comparison way healthier. I won't go to the second since we got you on the air with us. First of all, I'm really glad you called in. And as I also told the people before, I was so looking forward to your first interview, which almost unbelievably was almost 3 years ago now, because you were such a staunch defender of parental sovereignty. And this time we're in communication for a totally different purpose. So I'm sorry, I'll give you the floor. Tell us about your kids, starting with wherever you'd like to, overall, or you want to start with the first couple kids. It's up to you.
Oh, well, absolutely. And I'll be the first to confess, I'm not the full-blown hippie parent as they're defining out in social media. My family doesn't. We don't practice the best of diets. I'll confess this. I like my Oreos and Doritos. We eat well balanced. We eat what we can, but we also well, we'll enjoy the trip to McDonald's, on a Monday. So I don't want, the audience to think that the only way to have a healthy child is if you're 100%, completely organic and whatnot. But what had happened in my family is I have 4 children, and they range from 22 to 8. And my first son I had when I was very young, I was 26 years old. And, of course, like 90% of the parents out there, we just did what we were told to do. You vaccinate. That's what it is. They were breastfed. All of them were breastfed, so I didn't have any issues there. And looking back, it's almost sad that I have a hard time remembering if there was a week or a 2-week span that the daycare didn't call, that I didn't have to go pull him out. And, of course, parents who have kids in daycare, you have to take them to a doctor or a clinic and get a note that says, this fever that they have is fine, or the pink eye or whatever that they have is cleared up. So I can't honestly remember a period of 2 weeks or 3 weeks where I wasn't picking up my son at daycare. And the sad thing about this is this was normal. This was welcome to motherhood. Your children get ear infections. Your children get pink eye. Your children get colds. They get flu. They get sinus infections. I mean, the list is endless. And this is normal. This is what I'm told. This is what happens. I'm in the clinic with 50 other mothers with kids in there with all these ailments. And don't get me wrong. I know there's not a vaccination for pink eye or a vaccination for the cold, but I think it lends the credibility to the fact that the immune system was so weakened by all of these vaccines that they're just susceptible to everything that passes by.
Absolutely.
So 5 years. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I said absolutely. Perfect.
Yeah. So 5 years passed. He's an only child for 5 years. And we live a normal life, as normal as can be, I guess. And I have my second son. Well, again, I do what I'm told. All this has to happen. And the same thing starts happening with him. I'm picking him up at daycare. I'm missing work. But this is normal. I'm accepting this. I've already had one child. Why wouldn't this one be any different? Then, I'd say he was maybe 3 or 4, and the signs of, and I cringe to say this, the signs of ADHD came out. Now, not being a first-time mom, I didn't want a doctor just to tell me my kid was hyper in school and he had ADHD and let's put him on medication. I noticed he was a little bit more energetic, and, he had some other things going on. Well, when he got into kindergarten, there became behavioral issues. And they were above and beyond what I knew an energetic little boy could do. I've already been through this. I know this. I'm experienced. I'm 31 years old. I know everything that's going on, right? So I started doing some research, and it seemed like an awful lot of stuff was pointing back to vaccines. And so I'm doing more and more research, and I start thinking, maybe they aren't the best thing for my kids, because apparently I shouldn't have ear infections every 2 weeks, and I shouldn't have pink eye, and I shouldn't have these colds. So then I had my third child, a daughter, and I had her 7 years later. There was quite a gap there. Well, in 7 years of research, I knew what I was doing. And the funny thing is,
I'm sorry, tell me once again, what was it that made you aware of the fact that this may not have been normal?
When the doctor wanted to put him on Strattera, I believe was the name of it, an ADHD medication. My 5-year-old son, you're going to put a 5-year-old little boy on a medication for a disease that I will not say doesn't exist, but I will say that there's got to be something else that could be done to help them. So
right, and you don't want your son on that kind of medication, and I understand what you're saying. Hold on, we got a break coming up. Be back in 3 minutes.
Are you having guilty thoughts? They could land you in jail. Neuroforensic brain scans are being used to prove guilt in India, and they could be coming to a courtroom near you. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, and I'll tell you more in just a moment.
Your search engine is watching you, recording all your searches and creating a massive database of your personal information. That's creepy, but it doesn't have to be that way. Startpage.com is the world's most private search engine. Startpage doesn't store your IP address, make a record of your searches, or use tracking cookies, and they're third-party certified. If you don't like Big Brother spying on you, start over with Startpage. Great search results and total privacy. Startpage.com, the world's most private search engine.
If you're charged with murder in India, you could confess without saying a word. Their courts use brainwave technology to read defendants' minds and place them at the scene of the crime. The accused is fitted with a wired cap hooked to an EEG machine. Investigators then read statements about the crime and document the defendant's brain response. They claim the system is foolproof since it measures electrical activity sparked by knowledge in the brain. While the U.S. does not yet allow brainwave evidence, experts predict it's just a matter of time. Defense attorneys are petitioning for its use in American courts to exonerate convicted criminals. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht. More news and information at CatherineAlbrecht.com.
You are listening to the Logos Radio Network, logosradionetwork.com.
Okay, Sandra, you were saying that your oldest, that when he started being diagnosed with ADHD and given medications and pharmaceuticals for such, you became dubious about the instructions you've been given and started looking into vaccines and went through a 6 or 7 year period between, your second and third child when you did your research.
Right. They wanted to put him on this Strattera, and then I started reading the words about detox and this heavy metal detox. And I wish for the life of me I remembered what combination of supplements that I put him on, natural supplements to try to pull some of this heavy metal out of his system and try to get him back on track. And in 12 months after starting him on these supplements, he went from a student that was about to get kicked out of elementary school, who does that, to an honor roll student. So I'm going to attribute it entirely to the herbs and the supplements and the heavy metal detox I did. But that's neither here nor there. He's damaged, and he'll always be damaged. And that's a fact I can't change. It's, when we know better, we do better, right? The famous words. Right. So along came child number 3. And this is now I'm old. I'm 39 years old by now by the time this one comes along. And I'm wizened, and I've got this figured out. Well, I have her, and we were never sick. It was very odd. I thought, is there something wrong with this child? She was breastfed just like the other one. I can't tell you that she ever had an ear infection or pink eye or any of the things that are normal. Mom thought, this is normal. This is the way life is when you have a newborn. So a year and a half later, or 2 years later, I had my 4th daughter. They're very close in age. The last 2, up until this week, have never missed a day of school for being sick. They're 8 and 11. There's not a whole lot of parents out there that can brag that. My kids have never missed a day of school. Not kindergarten, not first grade. There's never been a time they couldn't go for sickness. Now, that's not normal. And I think that that's horrifying. I think it's horrible that there isn't a million other parents out there that can sit here and say this. And again, this goes back to my whole, I don't want anybody out there thinking, well, she eats all organic and she does this and she does. We don't. We really, we enjoy our pizza. We're a normal family. By every definition, we're normal, except I don't vaccinate my kids now because I've watched my son get sick. Now, my 22-year-old, I don't know what damage he's got. He's got damage. That's unquestionable. He's a very successful college student and lives in Texas, and he's doing great. But you can't put this into a body and not expect a reaction. Maybe he'll go bald at 40. Maybe he'll get gout at 50. I don't know. I damaged them. My 2 little girls, it's fantastic. And they're happy and healthy, and they're growing great, and they're not poisoned. And I just would swear to anybody, you put my 4 kids on a stage and tell me that there's not a difference between the health, you're wrong. It's unquestionable, and I raised them all exactly the same way, just like you said at the beginning of the broadcast. There's no difference in diet, no difference in the breastfeeding time, no difference in how we slept, no difference in anything. You can't tell me there's not a distinct difference in their health. You can't. I defy anybody to tell me that.
Yeah, no, I'll quote from your own response to my query on the Facebook page. The second 2, 8 and 11, have never missed a single day of school due to illness. It's so clear, the difference. It's ridiculous. And there are so many stories like that. And Sandra, I got, we got 150, just over 150 responses, only in a matter of most of them within a few hours on that.
Right. I was reading all of them.
On the thread, right. And there are, there's not a single one that says that my vaccinated kids are healthier than my unvaccinated. There are 1 or 2 I saw where they said, well, I really can't say there's a difference, and as I said before, and I'll say again, you don't know if there's a difference. That the differences can be so subtle that they can display, unfortunately and critically, 8, 10, 12 years later, and some people think they can display much longer than that.
Well, I don't see how they couldn't. We're talking about heavy metal toxicity, and even without a biology degree or immunoglobulin degree, whatever you want to call it, it's basic knowledge that this heavy metal can affix to the brain surface and to the integral parts of the brain, and they don't go away. This isn't rocket science. They don't go away. So how is this not causing damage? It's impossible. I just can't wrap my mind around somebody thinking this is a good thing.
Well, I thought it was. And you thought it was before you realized it wasn't, and unfortunately, you found out the hard way. And like you say, when you know better, you do better. And I would dare say you did not harm your kids. The people who gave you the instructions, who know very well the harm that can come from it, the harm that can follow in the wake of vaccination, but who do their best to never inform you of same, they're the ones who harmed your kid.
True, but that's a fine line as well. You know, I've said it many times in the social media that parents will spend more time researching a cell phone plan than they will researching what medication their child gets or what injection they get, and it all has to do with trust. But you could say the same thing about a cell phone plan. I walk into Verizon, and they're going to say, this is the greatest plan you could have. I walk into AT&T, well, this is the greatest plan you can have. So we research, and we ask questions, and we try to find the answers. And why our society has become so programmed to believe that the guy in the white jacket with a degree on the wall knows everything or knows what's best for us or is infallible, I don't know why we're programmed to believe that.
Yeah. Well, but the important point is we are programmed, and that's a good way to put it. We are definitively, consciously, purposefully programmed to believe that. Our trusted government, you know, and the CDC that's related to them, and the FDA, which is a government organization that is supposed to be looking out for our health by carefully reviewing all the information they're given and approving or disapproving the drugs. But they still, that time after time after time, we know too well, they will look at information telling them that instead of a saline solution, instead of placebo being used to test the safety of a vaccine, they used aluminum hydroxide, or they used the same vaccine simply with the disease antigen removed, or they used last year's vaccine. They should be thrown out just as a matter of course. But no, just the opposite. As a matter of course, they get approved.
Right. That doesn't even define the gold standard of lab testing. In any lab, if you look at what their standard is, it's a double-blind, placebo-based study. They're not even meeting their own standards for testing these. How are we letting them get away with this?
Well, because we have no control. You know, and that's it's been driven home almost desperately over the last 7 years as I've been researching. We have no control. We can't talk to anybody at the FDA. If we do, they'll simply deny any problem, or they'll say they've looked into it, and that's it. It's so far beyond this, where, you know, the government is so humongous that we simply have no say in the matter. I mean, it's frustrating as can be. You think all those online petitions that go to the various organizations, and including the White House. I put up a meme one time about it, and you might as well talk to the fox about how uncivil it is to eat someone's chickens, and the fox will sit there and say, you're right, until you leave, and then he'll just continue on the way to the chicken coop.
So what's the answer? How do we take back control? We were never supposed to lose control in the first place. These are our employees. These are our servants, our representatives. How do we fix this?
It's not going to be an easy fix if it's ever fixed at all. I mean, it's tough. You know, and I personally, I've expressed it many times on the show. I personally think the motivations are much darker than most people ever want to consider. You know, it's like a second layer of cognitive dissonance for those people who used to think vaccines were great and now think they're terrible, justifiably so. There's a whole other layer of cognitive dissonance, which is to be able to admit even the possibility that the motivation behind the entire paradigm, perhaps it wasn't in the beginning, but at this point, is much darker than we would like to consider. But we'll consider that for 2 minutes while we take the next break and be back at it.
All easy.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful...
Okay, Sandra, I'd like to bring the audience up to speed on what we were discussing during the break, which is that this movement against vaccines didn't start with Jenny McCarthy. It didn't start with Dr. Andrew Wakefield, but started many, many years before that.
Oh, yeah. You know, the very first anti-vaccine movement, for lack of a better term, was in the late 1800s. You can find information on this. This isn't anything, you know, God love Jenny, and she put herself out there, and, you know, she really is a hero to the quote-unquote movement, but she isn't why we do what we do. I mean, there's a vast majority of us who are anti-vax, not because of autism. Autism isn't even a factor that came into our decisions. There's a plethora of other reasons, but, you know, this movement's been around. The difference is is we have this amazing social media platform, many different social medias. We got the Twitters, the Facebooks, everything, to enable us to gather and talk about this. You know, I'm old. In 1990, if you wanted to gather, you did it in your front yard. Well, now we can gather with people from across the country and across the world, and we're making a move. We're making a difference. And unfortunately, those that don't know better think it's all Jenny or it's all Wakefield or it's all, you know, this is all new. And this isn't new. This has been around since the beginning. People want a choice. People want educated. They want the information. And, you know, we got to get it to them.
Right. And I was just starting to tell you, there's another Facebook friend who answered someone else on another Facebook page, and they were talking about Vaxxed, the movie, about which we will speak later on in the show. But they were talking about Vaxxed, and of course the director of the movie, and probably the biggest name associated with it as far as the vaccine awareness community is concerned, is Andy Wakefield. And so they were talking about Andy Wakefield, mentioning Jenny McCarthy, how these people... Jenny McCarthy started the movement, and she's just a Hollywood star. And Andy Wakefield was disgraced, and his license was taken away. No, she came back with a laugh out loud. She said, no, actually, the anti-vaccine movement started back with Edward Jenner, who started the entire vaccination process because his kids died early, when they were like 19 and 21 with TB and other diseases, which we can easily not assume, but easily guess that were caused by the vaccines given to them, or as you so well stated before, that the vaccines that were given to them, the smallpox, disturbed their immune systems so greatly that through the course of their lives, they picked up everything that was around them.
Mm-hmm. But, you know, you said something just a second ago that kind of struck me, and it's what everybody says. Well, Jenny McCarthy's a celebrity. Well, we've forgotten Jenny McCarthy's a mom. That's where this came from. She is fortunate enough and blessed enough to have a platform that can reach millions of people with her beliefs. Now, why don't we discount a celebrity when he talks about his political beliefs or when he writes a check to sponsor a politician? You know, we don't go, oh, you know, he's just a celebrity. He's just a celebrity. Well, you know, he's a human being. He's a father. He's a husband who is got the ability to use his platform to speak about something he's passionate about. Wouldn't we all love to be in Jenny McCarthy's shoes and be able to get on TV and go, what, there's something hokey going on? She's blessed to have this ability, but everybody's like, no, she's a bunny. She's a Playboy bunny. No, she's a mom. Damn, right. She's a mom.
No, that's an excellent point. And having that platform, she did indeed influence many people, and still is doing so. Is still doing so. And the reason the vaccine awareness community adopted her is because they agreed with what she said, not because they were following her, but in a sense, it's because she was following them or us.
She shined a light. She shined a light on the problem, and she's got the brunt of, you know, we don't know what her career would have been like. You've got the Rob Schneiders out there who lost contracts because of their stances. You know, he lost that contract with that insurance company. And so these celebrities have nothing to gain by going out there and talking about this with their parents and they're concerned citizens, and they are political, and they know what they're talking about, and they have the ability to do it. How blessed are we to have these people to speak for us? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. And your comment about the internet coming online, that was so to the point as well. The Evidence of Harm, written by David Kirby. That was, I think, the first book I read, and it basically chronicles the advent of the internet as an incredible communication device, and how it allowed all these parents, many of whom were well-educated and some professionals, some scientists, to get together over the internet and start realizing that the amount of mercury that had been in the vaccines given their kids was enormous. And that group of people, they founded Age of Autism and other like websites. And they've been involved now for, my goodness, 20 years, 25 years.
Mm-hmm. And so that really irritates me when we've got the pro-vax crowd, and gosh, I wish we could find other terms for this, but, you know, don't use the internet. You know, just not everything you read on the internet is true, and that's very much true. Yeah. It still gives us the tools, and it's the same tools their doctor uses. I don't want to hear the argument. When the doctor leaves the room because he doesn't know what's going on, he's getting on Google and he's looking. It gives us the tools to pick through the information that we need, and I'm not talking about a biased pick through. I'm talking about, you know, I've read the good stories about vaccines, if you want to call them that. I've read what studies actually paint vaccines to be a viable and safe solution. And I've read the negative. And unfortunately, you know, you've got to make the decision on how much evidence you're going to read before you determine what's right for your family. And the evidence is just overwhelming against them. And it gives us these tools. So the excuse that I don't know what I'm doing or the excuse that I'm uneducated doesn't work anymore in today's society. You can't say that anymore. You have the tools. This is the information age.
Yeah, no, the web is an incredible information tool, information source, but as in the gathering of any information, you have to have some discernment, you have to have common sense, you have to have focus, and a degree of intelligence. And most people have some or a lot of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's I tell people, they ask me what you how arrogant are you? You're not a scientist. You're not a doctor. Well, no, I didn't even graduate college, but that doesn't make any difference.
Look,
I can read.
I did my taxes, and I'm not an accountant. I can change the oil in my car, and I'm not a mechanic. That argument holds zero water right now. It really does. That you can't say that anymore. We're all accountants and we're all mechanics, and to a degree, we've all always been doctors. If we have kids, we've always been a doctor. Now we just have more information to be a better doctor. I can't do brain surgery. I'm willing to concede that, but we have the information, so I don't need a degree on my wall to tell me if my child is sick.
Right, and Marcella Piper Terry hit it on the head in an interview that there's YouTube video of it. It was short, about 4-minute. Interview she gave to someone. She was basically answering a question during the CDC march back in, I think it was October last year or August, or whenever. But in the middle of it, she was talking about the difference. Well, let's put it this way. Her sentence literally was, they think we're so stupid we don't know the difference between ingestion and injection. And, and isn't that one way of just boiling the entire issue down?
Absolutely. They think 3 syllables are too many for the common parent or the common educator to understand. And it's just so frustrating. It is. There's just so many, there's so much to be done. There's so much that has to be done to fix this.
Yeah. And all we can do really is try and make one person at a time, at worst, and at best, say in the audience of, I think, several hundred that saw at least the first screening of The Vaxxed in New York last Friday, several hundred people, some of whom likely would have been new to the issue, most of whom most certainly were not. But, you know something like that is going to come up, and you grab your cousin whose wife just had a child, and you just make him come with you. And it's so you can wake up more than one person at a time. But yeah, something's got to be done. And we discussed before what's going to happen. Whatever happens will be revolutionary, without a doubt, because the social aspect of it, the entire ambiance has been so well directed over this last 4 decades through the media, which is now owned, in essence, by the pharmaceutical companies, because the government is also owned by it. The FDA is owned by it. The CDC is owned by it, but they kind of own each other. I think the whole thing goes back to the financiers, and it's so well entrenched and so insidious that something on the order of a revolution is going to have to happen. And of course, the first revolutionary act is to stop vaccinating. So we're on the ground floor level as we speak. Sandra, you came in a little bit late. Will you be able to stay another segment or so with us?
Absolutely.
Okay, good, because you came in a little bit late, and not only that, frankly, you know your stuff. You've been doing this for so long. And you think how many people have been out there doing this for, like yourself, for now 10, 15, 20 years. It's incredible. I would love to have some MDs on who were practicing back in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, and can just come on and say, oh, yeah, nobody died from measles. I mean, some kids died while they had the measles. But it wasn't the measles that killed them. Virtually everybody came through it. Not only that, they were immune for life. And if they had a bad case of eczema that had been running for 2 or 3 months, guess what? The eczema cleared up after the measles, after they recovered from measles. So
wouldn't that be fantastic if we could get that to happen? I mean, if we could get somebody to speak. I think society is a visual or a audio. They want to hear it. They don't want to read it in a statistic.
Hang on, break.
Well, my baby was a child so strong.
perfect baby, never did no wrong. Then we took her to that infant doctor. They took a needle and shot her. That evening, she stopped breathing, her face turned blue. Oh Lord, her face turned blue. Hey, welcome back to the Vaccine Myth and Issue of Trust. It is still Sunday, the 3rd of April, 2016. I am still your host, Sean Siegel, and we still have on the line with us our guest, Sandra Staley. But first, as always, I want to say a word about the song to which we were listening as we came back in. They Took My Baby Away. I'm always compelled, obviously, to say something about it because it's such a poignant case. We have Lila Rose, a 5-week-old, beautiful little girl, healthy at that age, going in for a Hep B shot and dying in her parents' arms 15 hours later, after, as the song says, turning blue. And as we know, the Belkins, the parents, received a phone call from the coroner's office telling them that they had detected brain damage in Lila Rose, but that some days thereafter, Mr. Belkin found himself in a face-to-face conversation to the same young woman who had called him originally at the coroner's office, being told that Lila Rose's death would be listed as SIDS, as sudden infant death syndrome, with no mention anywhere. And you can bet your bottom dollar that the Belkins have searched diligently for it. No mention anywhere in the medical records of the brain damage. And of course, while that conversation was going on, the supervisor monitored it carefully to be sure that Mr. Belkin was given the correct final message and that the reputation of vaccination, the incorrect, false, insidious reputation of vaccinations as safe and effective was once again maintained. And you know that she didn't think of that herself, that she was told specifically, maybe not that one instance, but she knew very well that she needed to do her best at every juncture to maintain that reputation of vaccination. It's an insidious paradigm. The reason that injection of disease antigens, toxins, neurotoxins, undigested proteins which have no business in the bloodstream, and contaminants that can be carcinogenic or otherwise dangerous doesn't sound like a rational approach to disease prevention or better health in any ways, because it isn't. It is not a rational approach. Sandra, during the break, we were talking about how easy it is to actually maintain your kids' health. So let's get into that a little bit. You were saying that, and both of us saying that vitamin C, we're talking about the magic water. Tell us about your magic water.
Well, you know, what I was saying is you know, I'm real active on the social media, and I see these great parents who have, you know, $1,000 of essential oils in their cupboard and all this stuff. And like I've said about 4 times, I'm normal. I don't have all that. But what I do have is about 5 different items that keep them healthy. First and foremost, the most biggest item I have is the fact that I don't vaccinate, of course, and I don't go to doctors unless they can't be treated. And there's so sort of a broken leg or a heart attack, there's very little that can't be treated at home. But we've got our colloidal silver, our magic water. If any of my kids sniffle or cough, they're, oh, Mom, I need some magic water, and boom, it's gone. You've got honey, which is nature's Neosporin. I mean, there's normal things that you can have for no extra money in theory. Everybody's probably got honey in their cupboard. You can take care of 90% of what goes wrong with your kids right out of your kitchen cupboard. As a normal parent, I have normal things in my cupboard. You don't need to educate yourself for hours on essential oils to figure out what's going to treat what. It's very simple.
Right. In my case, I use vitamin C. Anything happens, I do the vitamin C. I got bit by my own cat. It was my daughter's cat, but I was keeping him. And I did something stupid. He just suddenly, unexpectedly, obviously, just dug into the right side of the top of my foot, and he hit right on a nerve. And the first thing I did was I went and got, I don't know, something like 10 grams immediately of vitamin C and took 100,000 IU of D3. And it was a bite. It was a hurt. You know, it hurt. But I healed. I never had to go to a doctor. Never thought about going to a doctor. I mean, at this point, quite frankly, I might have died before I went to a doctor because, when it comes to infection, I don't think they know a cure from a hole in the ground. They don't try to cure you. They just try to subdue your symptoms. You know, I mean, that's facetious, but only to a small point. I mean, had the infection gotten that bad, certainly I would have gone to get antibiotics. But as someone said, Dr. Mayer Eisenstein, I believe it was, certainly before he died, said that antibiotics are a precious resource, but they should only be used in a life-threatening situation. Otherwise, just like vaccinations, but not to the degree, they dampen the effect of your immune system. They kill indiscriminately. They kill all the bacteria, most of which are good, make up a good portion of your immune system, and they're killed indiscriminately by antibiotics. And so if you're not, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you can't forget, you had mentioned vitamin D, and you can't forget what nature's giving us without stopping at the grocery store. If, you know, these kids should be outside. These kids should be barefoot outside, frankly. You know, we're given this gift of sun, which is the best source of vitamin D we can get. And, you know, I hear all the time, well, it's cold. Well, that's great. The kid's not going to get sick from the cold. This is another old wives' tale we have to start working on getting rid of. But these kids need to be outside. And, you know, even more so, I think, than making sure they eat an organic apple. They've got to be outside playing in dirt. I don't see what else can beat that.
Oh, you're right. I mean, the immune system thrives on exposure. Quite literally. That's how you sometimes get sick and give your immune system the chance to get you well. And as we've learned over this last year has just been a revelation for me when I start getting into the beneficial aspects of these various diseases. You know, how the measles rash actually. Well, this may not be the correct example, because apparently if you get measles but don't get the rash with it, then that can lead to skin diseases, bone disease, and certain tumors later in life. What it means is that for whatever reason you didn't develop the rash, and one of the reasons you don't develop the rash is because you have already existing measles virus specific antibodies in your system before you're actually exposed to the virus. And that, of course, can come from vaccination.
Mm-hmm. Well, the latest one to just come out, if I'm not mistaken, was talking about the chickenpox and the brain cancer, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, you have to correct me on that. That if you've got a history of chickenpox, then it potentially reduces the risk of brain cancer later in life. Is that
right. I'm looking at it. Brain cancer risk may be reduced in those with history of chickenpox. The name of the article, it's called neurosciencenews.com. And yes, indeed. And we've seen several other studies.
Mumps reduces the risk of cervical cancer or female cancers in my daughters. I mean, I think there's a design at work here that, you know, religious or not, you don't have to be religious to believe that the body and the chemistry on our earth is designed for us to be healthy and be fruitful. It's, you know, having these natural, normal, harmless diseases is what's going to make us live longer, healthier lives, period. There's just no debating it anymore.
Right. Exactly. It's as though, not as though, but it is nature, preparing us during childhood and adolescence, as far as the immune system goes, physiologically, via the various infections we incur toward successful health during adolescence. During adulthood, that we're being prepared. And in some cases, it depends on the status of your genetics, your immune system, your environment. In some cases, kids go through, unvaccinated kids, that is, go through their whole lives without ever experiencing any of those childhood diseases. It's not typical, but it happens. I've seen many stories like that. And they can go through their entire lives never having to go to a doctor or take a prescription unless they got, as you mentioned before, something like a broken leg, you know, or something that requires emergency surgery for some sort of triage measure. But other than that, they're perfectly healthy all their lives long. And certainly the unvaccinated kids, when they're developing those infectious diseases, they are actually being cleansed in an unreproducible fashion. The science can't even begin to hope to understand how that takes place within the body, because there's no way to understand that it's intracellular communication. There's simply no way to comprehend it.
Nope, that's right.
It's incredible. I mean, it's miraculous when you think about it. And if we didn't have that ability to develop the symptoms of disease, as a species, we wouldn't exist. That's what cleanses us when we get sick in the first place. And of course, I, at least metaphorically, have equated infection itself with symptomology, that infection is a symptom of an immune system that allowed the infection to take place in the first place. Because infections, even the ones they don't consider opportunistic, are opportunistic. Andy Wakefield.
But again, we're programmed to believe that they're not. We're programmed to hear the word infection and go, oh my God, we've got to stop that program. It's the same thing with fevers. We're programmed to say, he's got a 100.1 fever. Something must be wrong. We have to change this mentality.
Right. Well said, because yes, 101 fever means something is right. That means your body is responding correctly. It's not right in the sense that there was probably something you did or something in the environment or some other sort of exposure that allowed the infection in the first place. But that fever is part of the symptoms that are literally meant to bring you back to wellness. That's something right.
I tell you, I don't even own a thermometer. And this has been my latest rant.
Hold on, one more break. Hang on.
This is the Logos Radio Network.
Sandra, you're just saying it, throw away the thermometer. And it made me think of two things. Yeah, yes, absolutely. And it made me take, well, first of all, what good's it going to do you to measure it? I mean, why do you not trust?
The odds of a child getting up to 108, which is actually the coma danger rate. Everybody wants to tout 104, 103, or whatever they want to tout. But a normal child isn't going to get up to 108 and go into a coma state without. Generally, those infections are happening under a hospital setting because something has just gone wonky. It just doesn't happen. And knowing that number sets up the child for panic because mom's panicking, and especially if mom's using a rectal thermometer or whatever they're using, everybody's panicking because of this number. What happened to treat the human? We've got to treat the human. And my kid could be running 102 temperature but still be outside jumping on the trampoline. Why do I need to worry about the number? The body's doing what it's supposed to do. So for kids, I don't own a thermometer. Never have. Don't need them.
Right. I mean, how arrogant can we get to assume that we know what temperature the body has to be before the existing infection is eliminated? Because that's the purpose of it, and only your body knows how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point? And your point was excellent. It's either Mayo Clinic or National Institutes of Health, but they have a page on fever, and indeed, they don't quote 108, but they literally, it's such an unusual figure that it stays in my head. They literally quote 107.6 for some reason, like as though 107.7 would make a difference. Yeah, as right. The not the breaking point, but at a point to which you don't have to worry. There's no reason to be for undue concern. That in essence, the fever is working. They say literally verbatim, the fever is working for the person, not against the person. But yeah, I wanted to tell the story of an Andy Griffith show. In which the health department lady comes and they're trying to get everybody vaccinated, and they go out to we'll call him Farmer Brown, to his ranch because he won't do it, and he won't let his kid be vaccinated, one or the other, and he's standing there with a shotgun waiting for him when they pull up, and so they're talking to him from 20 feet away, and they get into the fever thing, and he was talking about how his son had gotten how hot. And the nurse or the lady from the public health department said, well, how hot did he get? And she, of course, was looking for a temperature. And he said, dang hot. And I just started laughing. And years ago, I would have thought he was just such so stupid for not measuring the exact temperature to the 10th of a degree. But he caught it because that's only dang hot. Okay, all right. It's like you said. No one ever asked him, well, how soon did the boy recuperate? Was he outside maybe playing while he was dang hot? What were all the other aspects? Yeah, we've become such a kind of a wuss society, and very purposefully so, because it goes along with that whole religion, the AMA religion, and the vaccine religion, and the FDA religion, and the CDC religion, because that's what it comes down to. That trust. When you think about it, the amount of trust you have to have in somebody to completely hand over, to sacrifice the wellness of your child to his or her hands, and you put the wellness, if not the life of your child, into the hands of these people, just because they have a degree, they have a white coat, and they can dispense pharmaceuticals, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, there was a pediatrician who had posted it anonymously, because I understand that they're under quite a bit of scrutiny right now. But he said, in all honesty, any parent who reads 30 minutes about the dangers of vaccines, the side effects, I won't even call them dangers, let's just call them side effects. And if any parent doesn't believe that the brain swelling and death is dangerous, then that's up to them. But he said if a parent reads 30 minutes, they've actually read as much, if not more, about the dangers and side effects of vaccines than anybody with a doctor degree, a pediatrician or general practitioner. I understand there's the people that work in the immunity field that supposedly have read more, but he said 30 minutes, and you've read more than he did in his residency about the dangers of vaccines. Now, how can we tolerate this?
Yeah, we can't. There's no way to excuse it or explain it. I mean, there's got to be some darker motivation somewhere. I'm sorry. The people at the top surely know as much as I do, and as much as you do, about health. I mean, there's somebody out there that knows everything that's going on that we've been discussing. They know that vaccines can cause ADHD. They know that vaccines can cause autism. They know that vaccines can cause a whole bevy of other autoimmune diseases, ranging from lupus to diabetes to asthma. I mean, they're having so many studies out there, and they're aware of them. They know them, and yet they continue to not only maintain the myth of vaccine safety and efficacy, but they propel it, they push it, and they expand it. They expand the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We got to stop it. We got to do something.
Yeah, something's got to be done, and I guess there's at least a start. And there is another on the 22nd of April, another CDC rally going to take place. I didn't mention it last week, and I've been meaning to put it up on my Facebook page. And I'm ambivalent about it, quite frankly, because you can march in front of the CDC all day long, but you're not going to get inside it, and you're not going to change anything. But you can make more people aware, and I think probably the best thing that happened during the August last year's CDC march and gathering in Atlanta was bringing on board the black community, because they were made aware. Of course, it was done to a great extent before the march took place, but it brought them into the march, participating. But can you imagine, and I've seen the video of one black mom, but can you imagine being an African-American parent and learning that the CDC tossed out such critical information about the effect, specifically in this case of the MMR, on your children and their likelihood of developing autism? Just infuriating.
What's going to happen is more people are going to show up this year, and we may or may not be featured on CBS News, and that's fine, because more people are going to show up this year, and then more people are going to show up next year, and this is going to grow, and this is going to get huge, and it's going to get noticed. It has to get noticed. The mainstream media cannot ignore us forever. So, 5 people make 10 people, 10 people make 20. It's going to get bigger every year, and we need to keep up the fight. How else are we going to win? I mean, you could stress this back to women's rights or black rights. You could do any movement like this, so to speak, started out very small. Started out with 1 or 2 people. We have the tools to make it millions, exponentially larger. We've got to fight. We just got to keep showing up, even if we get frustrated that CBS News isn't featuring us. We got to keep showing up.
Well, we're doing it. We're doing it on this show. We're doing it on Facebook, and it may sound trivial to some, but it's certainly not. When you consider that somebody like Sherry Tenpenny's Facebook page has gone from 12 or 15,000 when I joined to now 165 or so thousand. Vaccine Information Network out of Australia is at 135,000 or so. We know that Great Mothers has gone from 6, the original group, to now over 10,000, starting to get closer to 11,000. And that's a secret group, which are the ones that are going to be the smallest.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And it
really is. And Vaxxed is just, Vaxxed is the proponent. Oh, my God, all of that happening was just amazing. Even though we got kicked out of Tribeca, it may have actually been a blessing in disguise. And we've gotten more publicity since we got kicked out than I think we would have if we'd have just remained in it.
Hang on.
Put down that soda and back away. New research shows drinking one sugary soft drink a day dramatically increases men's odds of developing aggressive prostate cancer. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht, back with details in a moment.
Privacy is under attack. When you give up data about yourself, you'll never get it back again. And once your privacy is gone, you'll find your freedoms will start to vanish too. So protect your rights, say no to surveillance, and keep your information to yourself. Privacy, it's worth hanging on to. This message is brought to you by StartPage.com, the private search engine alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. Start over with StartPage.
If you're a man who chugs soft drinks, I've got some bad news. A 15-year study finds men who drink just one can of soda a day were a whopping 40% more likely to develop prostate cancer than those who avoid the stuff. Swedish researchers tracked the diets and health of 8,000 men. They found a clear link between soda and sugary soft drinks and more aggressive, fast-growing forms of the disease. Their analysis also linked consuming large amounts of rice, pasta, cakes, and sugary cereals with a less serious form of prostate cancer. So, fellas, swap that soda for water. The family jewels will be very grateful. I'm Dr. Catherine Albrecht for StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine.
Actually be kidding about chemtrails.
Looking for some truth? You found it. LogosRadioNetwork.com.
Sandra, let's talk about Vaxxed, the movie, for a few minutes. We know we've been looking forward to it coming out for the last few weeks since the completion of it was announced, and of course, a great deal of excitement aroused when we found out that Robert De Niro was not only going to introduce the movie at the Tribeca Film Festival, but after apparently a conversation with U.S. Representative Bill Posey last Friday night, was getting ready to introduce it personally, as opposed to simply adding it to the schedule. So he had been significantly impacted by the information given to him by Bill Posey, who, again, is a U.S. representative. And then something happened over the ensuing 24 hours, and De Niro announced that it was being removed from the schedule. And it's unclear what exactly happened. He said in a statement that some information was given to him by, we don't know who, that apparently the science of the movie was in question, and he just didn't think it raised the right questions in the public and was pulling it from the schedule. But as we know, within a few hours, they announced that the Angelica Film Center, I believe it's called, right down the road from Tribeca in Long Island, was going to start showing the movie, and it started there last Friday.
Mm-hmm. But what he said is a contradiction to what he came out and said before this movie got pulled. He said he wanted to have this movie play in order to instigate conversation. So he never came out and said, hey, this movie's going to discuss the facts, or this movie's going to. And in fact, the movie in and of itself, which I'll admit I haven't been able to see yet, is not supposed to be an anti-vax propaganda or a pro-vax propaganda or whatever you want to call it. It's supposed to be about the cover-up and the fraud. So, De Niro himself said he wanted to show this so that it would initiate a conversation. So now for him to turn around 24, 48 hours later and say, maybe we better not, will we ever know what actually happened to stop him? Will we? And I know he wasn't the only deciding factor in this, but will we ever know what threat was made? Which I'll admit, I believe he was threatened. I truly do. I'll put my tin hat on. I believe he was threatened.
Well, I do too, and it may not have been directly, or it may have been directly, which it may not be very, very easy to think about for many people, but it's definitely a possibility. We know of many nefarious acts that have been perpetrated by the infamous powers that be in relation to the pharmaceutical industry and certainly the vaccine industry as well, and just the healthcare industry in general as well. But yeah, we have to wonder. We wish we'd had a fly on the wall. But I've seen listings of the ownership. There are 3 people that started the festival. I don't know the other 2 names, but Robert De Niro is one of them. But none of them are the owner. There's another person who's the owner of the festival, and that person's son is apparently very heavily vested in the pharmaceutical industry. So there is no telling. If somebody owns, I'm not sure what ownership means. We don't know what the contractual agreement is. Could the owner just simply say, you can't do it? That's what it sounds like. When you own something, you would seem like you would have ultimate control. But we don't know what the contractual agreements are. And again, we don't know what was said. But we do know.
But this could be a blessing in disguise. Look at the airtime that this whole controversy has gotten. Would it have gotten as much airtime, even on the mainstream media, as if it were just going to be running in the schedule as usual, status quo? Would we be hearing so much about it? I don't think so. So I think we have a blessing in disguise here. I think this is a historic moment. I really do. I think this movie will go down in history.
Well, I hope you're right, because I have an article that I wrote about it, and it pretty much expresses it in the title. It's called The Nature of the Beast, and the beast is, in this case, the CDC. And it just points out that all of those infractions, all those breaches of trust that were pointed out by the senior researcher, whistleblower from the CDC, it wasn't the first time that they took place. That he was talking about them in reference to the 2000 study that was published in 2004. But I go back in The Nature of the Beast, and I go back 1 year previous to that to the Verstraeten study that took place in 1999, made by the CDC, where, again, they didn't like the results that they got from the initially collected data, so they changed the way those data were formatted 5 times until it was the correlation between, in that case, between mercury and the incidence of speech and learning disorders and autism was watered down to statistical insignificance. And then they came out and announced that there was no correlation found. That's the nature of the beast. And, of course, the one before that was the one that got me started in earnest researching vaccines in the first place, which is the infamous polio scam, where they radically changed the definition of the disease as soon as the vaccine came out, which is preposterous. I mean, it's so obvious, it's preposterous. But it only works because nobody knew about it.
Right, and that is the number one. That is probably, in all these years of my being very open in my beliefs, I have a sign in my front yard, and my van had the verbiage on it and everything. That's the first argument that everybody seems to pop up. Well, what about polio? Did you see the children in the iron lungs? Well, sure we did. But, we have iron lungs today. It's just called respirators. And we have, I would have to go into the entire history of Jonas Salk testifying in front of the Senate subcommittee in 1977 that, his vaccine was causing polio. And these are things that these people aren't open to learning, though. All they learned about was in their high school when they were shown the pictures of 30 kids in a room and an iron lung. And, oh, thank God, we have this polio vaccine. And that right there is enough to open. It should be enough to open anybody's eyes to the fraud behind vaccines. Just that one vaccine, that one disease, that one historical. It's atrocious.
Exactly, it's atrocious and so obvious once you're given the facts. If you are willing to even think about it, if you're willing to even consider it, and that's where we come up against cognitive dissonance. And I understand it. When you're told your whole life from the time you're a little baby whom to trust, and those people all around you, everybody you're told to trust is telling you that vaccines prevent diseases and those diseases are terrible, then
absolutely. Most of us that are anti-vax now were at one point in time pro-vax. Something triggered us. So
right.
we've got to make it to where people are, getting pregnant and going, you know what, I think I've read enough. I don't think this child's going to be poisoned. I don't think I'm going to be afraid of measles and chickenpox. These are great diseases. What a gift to give my child. And, that's where we need to get. We need to now get it from child 1 instead of child 3. And we're going to do it.
Yeah, well, we are doing it with some people. I mean, I've been contacted personally. I'm sure you have at some points where people have seen what I've said, what you've said, what so many thousands of others have said, and have refrained from the get-go, from the beginning, from vaccinating. And it's such a boon to their kids. Yeah, that's each individual case like that is such a tremendous victory. It's ridiculous and horrible in the sense that we have to think of it like that, but it is. And that's the only way to think about it, because you can only raise one eyebrow at a time, unless you can get into Tribeca and maybe raise two.
We can. Someday we will.
Well, it'll keep going. And yeah, I'm going to look into showing it here in Austin at the old Brave New Bookstore. But there's so many people here who are, Andy Wakefield is now an Austinite and has been for a number of years. Polly Tommy, who was also a co-producer, she's also from Austin. And there's a large anti-vax or pro-choice, call it what you will, movement here in Austin. There's other people that are already planning on showing it. And there's been several different places mentioned. So it might end up showing 3, 4, or 5 times in town at different places. Each one.
All easy.
Sandra, we're in the last quarter of the show. I appreciate you sticking in with me because your information is enlightening and corroborating. And let's go back at least for a moment and just reiterate to the audience what you described as an incredible difference, in essence, between the health of your vaccinated children versus the health of your unvaccinated kids. Just a round-up summary, if you would.
Sure. To make a long story short, with my first two, when I was young, I did everything I was told to do. They were vaccinated on schedule. Everything was as right as it could be. And like I said, I can't remember a week or two where I wasn't showing up at daycare and getting them for an ear infection or something that was making them so sick that they couldn't even remain in a daycare. And that was normal. I was told that was normal by my mom, my sister, the doctors. Everybody says this is normal. Well, I had my next two children who were clean, and they've never missed a day of school. They're both a decade old, and they're not freaks of nature. This is not an exception to the rule. This should be the rule. Everybody's kid should be so healthy that they're not missing school for all these ailments, and it's because I never let a doctor near them. And I think that's what we have to accept as the norm nowadays, not the ear infections and the colds and the flus that all these babies are sick with all the time. And you know what I didn't even mention the first time, Sean, and it just occurred to me, was all the nights that I sat up with those first two boys, crying in the middle of the night because they wouldn't sleep. They were miserable. It was awful. I mean, how I escaped postpartum depression, I don't know. Many sleepless nights for years. And these last two we just didn't have any of these issues. We didn't have any of what was considered quote unquote normal. These babies were healthy. They were happy. It's black and white. I just can't there are no words to even put how different it is between my children, the first two who were poisoned and the second two who are not. There's no way to put it into words.
Right. And everybody take to heart that description, who aren't poisoned. That's what we're doing with vaccination. We're poisoning our kids. We are deliberately, for what we think is good purpose, but we've been terribly misled, deliberately holding our kids down to something that at best they simply accept, but typically they want to reject. They cry. It's a pain, especially with newborns and infants. It's an intrusion. It's an assault on their system. It's hardly an auspicious welcome to life, as I titled one of my notes on the Facebook page, and I was talking specifically about the Hep B vaccine, which ostensibly is to be given literally within a few hours of birth, and which we've had someone testify that they witnessed being given to a newborn before he even left the birthing journey. We're talking about within minutes of being born, being given a Hep B vaccine with its yeast proteins, with its aluminum. It's a horror. And
Sean, this goes back to the interview I did with you a couple years ago, and And I still run into this, and it still irritates me, where these mothers, they go into the hospital and give birth, and I have no qualms about that. I did 4 natural hospital births. That's great. If you're not comfortable at home, that's fantastic. Be where you're going to be comfortable. They don't realize that they're not hostages. And I read every day, and I'm not exaggerating, every single day about, oh, my God, I'm scared to go and have my baby there because when they take the baby away, I don't know what they're going to do. Don't let them take that baby away. Oh, for the love of all that is holy, don't let them take that baby away. Unless that baby is sick, which happens, these parents don't understand that they have rights, that they can get up and go home right then. That hospital makes $5,000, $10,000 for every day that they can keep you. You can go home. I was home in 3 hours with mine. Nothing can happen when you're at home. And when you've got a medical establishment that's taking these babies into another room to do things to them that you don't want done, and you told them you don't want done, or you've put it in writing that you don't want done, take control, take over. They need to understand they have rights. We have rights. We're humans.
Yeah. No, it's more than rights. They have the authority. The other people don't. They can tell you they do, and in worst scenarios, they can force what they consider their authority on you by force. I mean, we have one instance which I've covered where a family was told by the doctor, by the pediatrician, that they didn't give the newborn the Hep B shot, that they would call CPS, and CPS would have to respond because it was an MD, because it was a health official calling them, and they wouldn't necessarily have kept the case going very long. But this, I remember specifically, it was a Friday afternoon, and CPS, had they come, would have taken their baby and had the baby all weekend long before the family could have retrieved the newborn. And somewhere in there was also a possibility of them vaccinating the baby anyway while the baby was in the care of CPS.
And yet there's no law. There is not a law on any books. Well, no, I take that back. I believe New York now has the eye ointment and the Hep B, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is in New York, but I think that's the only one.
Vitamin K in New York, but I believe that's it.
Okay, yeah. All right. I knew it was one of those.
Yeah. No, indeed. In this case, the pediatrician tried to tell them that it was a law that the child get it, and they took the pediatrician down a notch. They made a phone call to a relative who was a lawyer and someone who knew the law, and they said, no, it's not a law. And the pediatrician backed off of that, but still threatened to call CPS. And if I remember right, the family actually ended up allowing the shot because they didn't want the baby taken away from them. I mean, what a Sophie's choice there. I mean, just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the solution to that? Ultimately, have your kids at home. Anybody that can should look into home birthing.
And I wish that we had what other countries have. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. We're the United States. My God, we should have the best of everything. We should have the best technology, the best birth rate, the best maternal care. We don't. We have a 33rd, I think, was the last stat that I'd read on infant mortality. But you know why? Because we have surgeons delivering babies, and this is not normal. This is not the way it should be. And I know that there's a million mothers out there right now going, oh, well, thank God I had a doctor present when I gave birth because we had these complications. Well, that's a whole other show, frankly, on why they may have had these complications, because in actuality, other countries have less than a 5% C-section rate. Why can't we boast that? Well, there's a good reason why we can't boast it, because we have surgeons delivering babies. So, I'm digressing from our topic, but...
Yeah, no problem. Anything related to vaccines is welcome. No, it's true. We have among the industrial nations, as far as industrialized nations, as far as I know, that without a doubt, the highest vaccination rate. That is the most vaccines given, especially in the first 2 years. And we have within that same group of, I believe, 39 or 40 nations, we have the worst infant mortality rate. I mean, there are nations that have worse rates, but when you get into those that have their population is malnourished, they're poverty-stricken, et cetera, which breeds disease naturally. So, I mean, vaccinations mean everything. Now, let me quickly just read this other one, just because I'm looking at it. A comment that is to the difference in health. My firstborn was vaxxed up until 3 years old. When I woke up to what was happening, he has autism, had many ear infections, eczema, low muscle tone. Only after his 4-month shots. Before that, he was ahead on gross motor skills, allergies, asthma. Basically, I had a healthy boy, and at each well visit, watched him decline in many ways. My 2 girls have had 0 vaxes Both girls have killer immune systems. Our daughter's only had 2 ear infections in 4 years. My youngest has had 0 ear infections. And my holistic pediatrician and I know why the girls are healthy, and my first isn't. Wait for it, because I didn't assault their immune systems with poison shots, end quote. And she just reiterated exactly what she said. And goodness, Andrew, that virtually every one of these comments tells the same story. And we're going to keep telling this story for the next month at least. I mean, every week.
Yep. And you know what? She's not only a mother, she's the doctor. She's the doctor. Any parent out there who denies that they're a doctor to their children, you know, you're their first step. You can't. God, you're there. You're their doctor. You really are.
Right. And you know, it does take some courage, especially these days when the seasoned people, the grandparents who have the experience, aren't living with the kids and the grandkids. So it takes a child or two to break you in, but by that time, you've lost your fear of disease, assuming you had it in the first place. And indeed, you become a doctor. And someone quoted, and I wish it were famous, that one grandmother is worth 2 pediatricians.
That's terrific.
You know, right. And at this point, I would have to say that one grandmother's worth 20 or 25 pediatricians. You know, I mean, it's difficult to talk about. I mean, a pediatrician, it's almost as though, especially when we're talking about infectious disease and certainly vaccines, going to a pediatrician is going backwards. You're going to get a ton of bad advice. Sandra, we're down to the last 15 seconds, literally. Thanks for coming on again, and maybe we won't have to wait 3 years before the next interview.
I hope not.
Okay, thanks for all the info and the input, and we're out of here. And appreciate it, and take care.